The red whistle. The deep woods are full of sounds you learn to categorize. The snap of a dry branch, the hoot of a barred owl, or the heavy trudge of a black bear. But once in a while you hear something that doesn't belong to the natural order. It's a sound that feels like a jagged blade cutting through the silence. I was finishing a grueling patrol near the boundary of a northern wilderness area, a place where the map ends and the trees seem to grow closer together as the sun goes down. The air was sharp with the scent of pine and frozen earth. Just as I reached my truck, I heard a high, piercing whistle coming from the dark thicket behind me. It wasn't a bird, and it wasn't the wind. It was a human whistle, clear and melodic, playing a tune I recognized from my childhood. I spun around with my light, expecting to find a lost hiker, but the beam only revealed a small red plastic whistle sitting perfectly upright on top of a fresh snowdrift. No footprints were leading to it, and no one in sight. I picked it up, and the plastic was boiling hot, searing my palm. As I dropped it in shock, the whistle blew again, on its own, from the ground at my feet. How could something be so hot in the freezing cold? I stood there in the growing darkness, my hand throbbing from the heat of that small piece of plastic. The silence of the forest felt heavy, like it was pressing against my eardrums, waiting for me to make the next move. I've been a park ranger for over 15 years, and I've seen my share of strange things, abandoned campsites, odd lights, and people who aren't quite right. But this felt different. This felt deliberate. I looked at the red whistle lying in the snow. The heat coming off it had melted a perfect circle into the drift, exposing the dark, frozen dirt beneath. I didn't want to touch it again, so I used a small twig to flick it into a specimen bag. I told myself it was a chemical reaction, or a high-tech prank by someone with too much time and a grudge against the Forest Service. I climbed into my truck and started the engine, the heater blasting to ward off the November chill. I placed the bag on the passenger seat and began the long, winding drive back to the station. The road was a narrow strip of gravel carved into the side of the mountain. To my left was a sheer rock wall, and to my right, a drop-off into a ravine filled with ancient hemlocks. About 5 miles down the road, the whistling started again. It wasn't coming from the woods this time. It was coming from inside the truck. It was the same tune, a slow, jaunty folk song my grandfather used to hum. I glanced at the specimen bag. The red whistle was vibrating so hard it was a blur, the plastic bag beginning to smoke from the heat. I slammed on the brakes, my tires skidding on the icy gravel. I grabbed the bag with my gloved hand and threw it out the window, watching it disappear into the dark ravine. I didn't wait to see where it landed. I floored it, my heart racing as I pushed the truck to its limits. I kept my eyes fixed on the road, refusing to look at the passenger seat or the rear-view mirror. When I finally pulled into the ranger station, I was shaking so hard I could barely kill the ignition. The station was a small, 2-room cabin with a single porch light that flickered in the wind. My supervisor, a grizzled man named Henderson, who had spent 30 years in these mountains, was sitting at the desk, cleaning his boots. He looked up as I stumbled in, his eyes narrowing at my pale face. "You look like you've seen a ghost, kid," he said, setting his brush down. I told him everything, the whistle in the snow, the heat, the tune, and how it had followed me in the truck. I expected him to laugh, to tell me I'd spent too much time in the high country and needed a vacation. Instead, Henderson stood up and walked over to the window, staring out into the black wall of trees. He didn't speak for a long time. The only sound was the wind rattling the window panes. Back in the late 70s, Henderson began, his voice barely a whisper. There was a kid who went missing in that same sector. A boy, maybe 7 or 8 years old. He'd gone camping with his parents. They said he was obsessed with his little red whistle. Used to blow it all day long until his dad got so annoyed he threatened to throw it in the fire. I felt a cold bead of sweat roll down my spine. Henderson turned back to me, his face etched with a deep old shadow. The boy wandered off while they were packing up the camp. Henderson continued. We searched for weeks. We had drones. Well, back then we had helicopters and hundreds of men on the ground. We found his footprints leading into a thicket, but they just stopped. No tracks leading out. No signs of a struggle. Nothing. I asked in a cracking voice. Did you ever find the whistle? Henderson nodded slowly. Found it 2 years later. It was sitting on a stump, miles away from where he disappeared. It was bright red, like it had just come out of the box. I was the one who picked it up. It was so hot, it burned my fingerprints right off. He held up his right hand. In the dim light of the cabin, I could see the smooth, scarred skin of his fingertips. The mountain doesn't just take people, Henderson said, looking back at the window. Sometimes it keeps a piece of them, a memory, an object, and sometimes that object wants to find a way back to the living. That night, I stayed at the station. I didn't want to be alone in my cabin, surrounded by the woods. I rolled out a sleeping bag on the floor of the office, but sleep wouldn't come. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard that high, piercing whistle. It felt like it was right outside the door, mocking the thin walls of the cabin. Around 3 a.m., the station's radio crackled to life. It was nothing but static at first, the kind of white noise that makes your hair stand on end. Then, through the hiss, a voice came through. It was soft, high-pitched, and rhythmic. It wasn't speaking words, it was whistling. It was the same tune. I sat bolt upright, my hand instinctively reaching for my flashlight. Henderson was already awake, sitting on his cot with his head in his hands. He didn't move to turn the radio off. He just sat there, listening to the ghost of a child playing a song from 50 years ago. It's closer, he whispered. We didn't move until the sun started to bleed through the trees, turning the frost into a blinding, cold white. When we stepped out onto the porch, the air was perfectly still. Sitting right in the center of the top step, as if it had been placed there with careful precision, was a small, red plastic whistle. It wasn't hot this time. It was covered in a thin layer of frost, looking harmless and discarded. But as I looked at it, I noticed a small smudge on the side of the plastic. It was a fingerprint, a small, child-sized print, burned into the red surface. I didn't stay in that park much longer. I requested a transfer to the flatlands, to a place where the trees are sparse and the horizon is always visible. But even now, years later, I can't stand the sound of a whistle. When I'm in a crowd and I hear someone call out to a friend with a sharp, melodic blow, my blood runs cold. The wilderness is a place of beauty, but it's also a place of hunger. It takes what it wants, and sometimes it sends back a reminder that it's still watching. I don't know what happened to that boy, and I don't want to know. I just know that some sounds aren't meant to be heard, and some things aren't meant to be found. If these stories from the deep woods make you think twice about your next camping trip, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss our next compilation. Click the next video to uncover more chilling encounters that park rangers were never supposed to share.